This lesson is on media and crime. Firstly, we're going to identify and explain ways the media is biased in the way that it presents crime, and then we're going to look at the ways media creates crime in society. So firstly, why do you think the media choose to report violent crime when only 3% of crime falls under this category? So 45% of media reports are about violent crime. So there's a big difference there between the amount of violent crime that's happening and the amount of violent crime that's being reported. So I want you just to firstly think about, why is this the case? So are the media biased in their presentation of crime? So we know that they are biased in the amount of crime that they report, and the statistic in the starter activity shows this, but are they biased in the way they present crimes as well? So I'd like you to watch this clip about two fathers that were both charged of murder and how they were covered slightly differently by the media. And I want you to think about, how would this affect the public's perception of crime, and how might this affect the decision-making skills of the police and law enforcement agencies? So the media play a role in agenda setting by deciding the focus of public debates and discussions about crime and deviance, because ultimately they choose what stories to present to us and what stories not to report. The media operate within a set of values about what is considered newsworthy. So media gatekeepers are people like journalists, producers and editors, and they are the ones that decide what stories to cover and how to present it. So we should know that word gatekeeper because we did it when we did research methods. So a gatekeeper is somebody who allows access. So the media gatekeepers are deciding what stories we have access to. So the sorts of news values that they decide or help them to decide whether a story is newsworthy are these. So does the story involve children? Does it involve violence or celebrities? If it occurs in our country or even more locally, so within London? Is the event easy to understand? And are graphic images used of the event? So I want you to look at some stories on the next slide, and I want you to decide, what of these news values does that story have? So the more news values the story has, the more likely it is to be read by the public, and so you're more likely to report it. So here's the three stories. The first one is when Prince Philip had a car accident. The second one, Ronaldo being fined because he evaded tax, and R. Kelly pleading not guilty on sex crime charges. So the first one, we can say that the news values that are involved are violence, not necessarily violence between two people, but it is obviously a car crash. Celebrities were involved, so royalty, I guess we could count as a celebrity, so a public figure. The event occurred locally, so it was within our country. The event is easy to understand. A car crash is quite simple, and we've got that graphic image, which is clearly going to be likely to be making headline news because it's shocking. So the second one, Ronaldo, we can say that there's a celebrity involved and the event is easy to understand. Obviously, it doesn't have all of the other news values, so if we were to compare the two stories, this one is likely to be on later pages of a newspaper, or you'd have to scroll down a newspaper website to see it. And then the last one, R. Kelly, on sex crime charges. Some of the crimes that he committed were on people that were underage, so we could say that children are involved. Violence arguably was involved as well. Obviously, he is a celebrity and the event is easy to understand. So you can see how these stories all compare to each other in terms of the news values that they hold and the likelihood of them being published. Now, we can say as well that car crashes involving royalty are very rare, but it would probably make front or headline news, and it did at the time. Similarly, R. Kelly's story, again, there aren't, relatively speaking, that many sex crimes that occur, but because obviously sex crimes are more shocking, they're more likely to be reported on by the media, and obviously if it involves a celebrity, it's almost doubly more likely to be reported. So the exaggeration of crime by the media is an important area of discussion for sociologists. So they look at how the media exaggerates the amount of crime that occurs, but also the type of crime that's occurring. So we know that they exaggerate violent crime more so than other types of crime. This in turn makes us believe that that type of crime is worse than it really is. And this is known as deviancy amplification. So there's a famous study done by Stanley Cohen, who is a key thinker that you need to know. So he did a study called Folk Devils and Moral Panics, and he examined the mods and the rockers. So the mods, if we don't know what they are, they're a subculture, and there's a picture of them on the slide, and the rockers are a different subculture or an opposing subculture. Now, it'd be good if you could watch this YouTube clip because it gives you some information about the two groups and how the media exaggerated the crimes that they were committing and how it led to even more crime occurring as a result. Here's a summary though. So Cohen is an interactionist sociologist who looked at how the media portrayed clashes between the mods and rockers. And he found that minor clashes and minor fights and disturbances were exaggerated, and they were made to be sort of seem like these big violent clashes and big riots. As a result, the police made more arrests and targeted anyone who looked like a mod or a rocker, and they would stop and search them to look for drugs, to look for weapons, because the police perceived them to be more likely to commit crime. And the media also made predictions of future clashes, which almost acted like it was an advertisement for teenagers. So they would advertise, or indirectly, that another violent outburst was going to occur. So, for example, in the clip, it talks about how the newspapers asked and reported that young people predicted the next clash would be in Brighton. So, of course, when the media got wind of this, they went to Brighton to almost find the clash. And all it did was it advertised this potential fight, and it led more people to join in. So the process of deviancy amplification is as follows, and it's not just linked to mods and rockers. We can say it links to lots and lots of different crimes. So firstly, a criminal or a deviant act is performed, and the media will report this, but they will do it in an over-exaggerated way. This increases the level of concern of the crime in people's minds, which is known as a moral panic. And once that moral panic occurs, people are really worried about that type of crime. The police will investigate that type of crime more, and obviously they'll find more cases of it. So this shows how the media creates more crime. It makes us worry in an over-the-top way about a particular crime, and that leads to more crimes occurring because the police are almost sort of on the lookout for it. And also it draws the attention to that type of crime, so people might be more willing to commit that type of crime. So we can also think about other ways that the media creates crime. It's estimated by the time that an average American child is aged 18, they will have seen on television 14,000 real and fictional murders and 200,000 acts of violence, which is huge. So arguably the media creates crime through imitation, because obviously we see all of these acts and we perhaps copy them. So having these deviant role models leads us to copy them and their behaviour. Arguably, we become desensitized because we see repeat acts of violence on television. So when we see it in real life, we don't see it as being particularly wrong. It transmits knowledge of criminal techniques. So if you're watching something like CSI, or if you're watching a detective program, you might see how the investigators uncover crimes, and that gives us knowledge on how to avoid being caught. It can be also a target, so media devices like phones, iPads, televisions, they can be a target for crime. People might burgle others in order to get devices like laptops and phones, or might commit street crimes like muggings in order to get those devices. It can also make people want unaffordable things. So obviously the media is used to advertise products to us, and it makes us want the unaffordable things that we can't obtain, and so therefore we might turn to crime in order to obtain the things that the adverts are telling us we should want and need. It also might glamorise offending and make it seem cool, especially things like Grand Theft Auto. It kind of glamorises stealing cars and getting into trouble. So lastly, what I'd like you to do on this slide is to watch a clip of the Bobo doll experiment. Bandura is a psychologist, but is useful for explaining how the media creates crime. So it's an experiment that he did using a Bobo doll, which is essentially like a blow-up doll that when you hit it, it falls down but springs back up. And it shows how children were likely to copy behaviours that they had seen imitated to them. So they might imitate, the behaviours they see the adult doing. So have a watch of that clip and write down in your notes, how does the media create crime according to Bandura? What does the Bobo doll experiment tell us? And then lastly, what I'd like you to do is to practice this question and complete it. So describe one argument for how the media creates crime in society. So really what you want to do is make your point is that the media creates crime through exaggerating how much crime takes place. You want to reference Cohen, so you'd say that Cohen talks about how the media creates moral panics in society, which makes people worry about a particular type of crime. And this leads to more of that type of a crime occurring in society. It leads to deviancy amplification, either because the police investigate that crime more and find more evidence of that type of crime, or because it leads people to actually go out and commit that type of crime because attention has been drawn to it. So have a go at answering that question, and if you could just submit this 3-marker on Show My Homework, that would be great. If you have any questions, then let me know by emailing me and I will get back to you. Thanks, bye.